Hello, students. So today's topic is music as a cultural capital. Uh, so before we get into how music is integral as a cultural capital, it is important to understand as to what is a cultural capital. Now, we have all heard of the term capital. We always relate it to money, investment. When we want to open a business, we think we need capital, which means we need a lot of money, which when invested and when we work on it and work in building what we want to invest upon, we get a return out of it. But in this sense, when you are saying cultural capital, it is a different thing altogether. Okay, so this term, this cultural capital, it comprises the social assets of a person. Now, the social assets of a person are education, that person's intellect, okay, that person's style of speech, the style of dress, and these other things which are socially perceptible. Now, when you see a person and he comes and meets you, or when you meet any other individual altogether, it is the cultural capital that is contributing to your understanding or perception of that person. Means how you will remember that other person is based on that person's cultural capital. Means that person's education, that person's way of dressing, that way that person talks. Okay, so in society it is actually an overlapping of cultural capital. That person will also remember you for your cultural capital. So this is what the term actually encompasses. uh, it functions, cultural capital functions as a social relation within an economy of practices. Okay, it is not an economy of finance in this regard, it's an economy of practices in, and these practices are social practices. So this is one way in which you can introduce the answer in, if you get this kind of a question in your exam. Okay, so it comprises of all the material goods as well as the symbolic goods. Okay, uh, material goods would be perhaps the clothes, the sunglass, okay, the motorcycle that you're riding. So all this adds to a person's uh, to the representation of that person in society. It is part of his cultural capital. So these are the materialistic things. Okay, and the symbolic things are the gestures, the way that person smiles, the way that person speaks, and these are things that also contribute in a major way, you have to understand. And these are what comprises the symbolic goods that contribute to the cultural capital. Now, and there are three types of cultural capital which you should write in your answer if it is a long kind of a question that comes: embodied capital, objectified capital, and institutionalized capital. Embodied cultural capital comprises the knowledge that is consciously acquired and passively inherited. Okay, and this happens through the socialization of culture and tradition. By socialization means when we meet other people, we are always having an exchange. We are influenced by others. Okay, so embodied capital, it is the knowledge that we are acquiring through our interactions with others. Okay, and this is not just consciously, means we try to follow certain people who we admire, and sometimes we don't actually try to follow another person, but we acquire some things from that person. For example, if you have friends who we consider as bad company, so they may influence you in a bad way also. So that makes you also possess a bad culture which you have inculcated from that person, but you didn't want to be having a bad culture. So it happened to you subconsciously, it didn't happen by your own effort. So it is passively inherited then. When you have bad company and you learn bad things, bad manners, abusive language, drugs, all these are bad influences. So these are also capital, but it is negative capital, which is which you acquire from others passively. You don't know that it is happening to you in a negative way. And the other is when you follow great people, you are admiring, say, an actor like, say, Irfan Khan, or maybe you're admiring a musician like Ravi Shankar. So you try to emulate him, you try to copy that person, and you try to play like him, you try to act like that person, or you have mannerisms, you develop mannerisms which are very nice or pleasant perhaps. So when you are doing this, it's happening consciously. So that is also more or less consciously acquired cultural capital altogether. Okay, so that means I have really been influenced by my teacher during my master's course, and I also try to copy his hand movements and the way he speaks, the way he uses examples while I'm teaching. And also in terms of music, I am a big fan of Eddie Van Halen. So when I play guitar, there are a lot of influences that you will find that I have in my playing that come from people like Eddie Van Halen and Joe Satriani, and maybe even John McLaughlin. So this is what is more or less embodied capital, which comprises of both material as well as symbolic goods. Okay, and then we have objectified cultural capital, which comprises of the person's property. Okay, which means my cultural property, not my house or my or not the things that I possess in that sense. It is a cultural capital. It means my work of art. If I am a painter, the painting is my property. It's called intellectual property. A song is my property if I make that song. So if somebody else can steal my song, so it's a property. I own it. So in that way, it is an objectified cultural capital. The moment I have created something, it can be a form of art. Okay, it can be scientific instrument, something that you invent also. Okay, it can be a formula. E is equal to mc square is like an objectified cultural capital of Albert Einstein. Okay, so you are remembered basically for this in a long term sense. Even Michael Jackson, every song will live on even though he is no more. So that is what is more or less objectified cultural capital. And it can be transmitted. This kind of cultural capital can be transmitted for economic profit. Means I may sell my song to some other person, and that person takes possession of it. So there is a economic exchange sometimes in this regard. And you might know that there's a story about Mozart. So Mozart was very poor, and he couldn't his family, his wife could not buy food for him and for herself. So she had to sell off many of his beautiful songs, beautiful music pieces actually, to another musician called Soliloquy, who was the court musician for the king. And in any case, those are beautiful pieces actually, which Soliloquy later, on in his dying bed, he had to admit that this is not my property. I did not make this kind of music. This is something that Mozart has. And Mozart died a pauper. He died hungry. He died a very pauper means absolutely poor. So he died a very poor man. But Mozart is God, right? So eventually, Soliloquy realized how much of a villain he has been during that era. So this is just an example. We have a lot of budding young musicians who have beautiful songs. For the need of money, they sell it off to music composers in the film industry. So, like, this is what is objectified cultural capital, and you can get a copyright over it. If you see, Rabindranath Tagore has Rabindra Sangeet, and there used to be a copyright. There is you can possess your copyright, and then your children can inherit it as well. So these are so in terms of music, you can now understand how it is a cultural capital. So the songs that you create are actually objectified cultural capital, and it is your property. If you're a musician, you have that aura and you speak of music and your knowledge of music, it emanates as embodied cultural capital that you have acquired from somebody. You learn music from your teacher and you teach it to somebody else, right? So, and that person consciously, it's a symbolic good sometimes. And maybe if you're always seen carrying a guitar, so there is also that chance that people will always associate you with your guitar or with your motorcycle, whatever, depends on with which you spend more time. So in that way it is also objectified capital. So in these ways actually you can see that music is a very integral cultural capital. It creates your personality. You are a musician, that becomes your identity. That is very a large contributor to your cultural capital. People will remember you for it. You can sell it and earn money, not totally as Mozart did, but you can always create music jingles for others. It leaves your, and they give credit, it is your property, right? If you make a beautiful song, please copyright it. A lot of people steal music, okay? uh, and the other form of cultural capital is the institutionalized cultural capital. Okay, it comprises of the formal recognition that you get for your cultural capital. If you're a musician, you might get a lot of awards, right? So this is the recognition that you get from institutions, from formal places. You can get a Padma Shri, you can be a Bharat Ratna. So that becomes also a major part of your identity. That contributes to your cultural capital. You should all aspire for it, all of you. You're all so talented. I'm sure many of you are going to be Padma Shris and Bharat Ratnas. Okay, so more or less, you can get a Bharat Ratna for your music, right? A lot of great musicians have. You can get a Padma Shri also. So practice hard. I'm sure the talent is there. You have to just nurture it. Okay. So enhance your cultural commodity. The major uh, contributor to your cultural uh, identity altogether uh, is music, and your cultural capital is your identity. Please understand that in life, in society, whenever you're interacting with people, that is the most important mark that you leave. Okay, people will remember you for how you have spoken, what you have done, what is your likes, how you teach, or how you influence them, how you influence others, so that they can also learn from you and say follow you like you follow Ravi Shankar or whoever else, right? So examples of cultural capital would be a person can be very educated, a person can be very skillful, a person can have a lot of knowledge in a certain area, and just like all these other forms of cultural capital, a person may not be a musician but can have high cultural capital. That person can be a beautiful dancer. Okay, that person can be a very skilled painter. Okay, that person can be very educated. So all knowledge is power. So all these, any kind of knowledge is power, and it contributes to your cultural capital. And music, being an ocean of knowledge, it is a system that is involving melody, rhythm. It invokes emotions, and there are various other variables like these. Okay, then how you describe music at a metaphysical level means it goes into the soul and the universe and things like that. Okay, and you can listen to some interviews by great musicians to understand a little bit more of the metaphysical. uh, there are some links I have sent, so you can go through them as well and go through the notes over there. It can You can get a greater understanding of what I'm trying to say. So since music has all these aspects, and if you are a musician, you are getting an insight and you're becoming a part of it. So your cultural capital just goes up. You become very rich. You become like say very rich individual. Maybe also in terms of money, may not be also in terms of money, but this is, I believe, the more important kind of wealth that you should acquire. Okay, and since this is an ocean of knowledge, music is a very integral cultural capital. If you want to write an answer in this regard, at the end of the in the conclusion, establish how music has acted as a cultural capital not just for individuals but also for communities and countries. India is famous for its music. So maybe India is not as rich as America in terms of money, but as a country, India is very rich in culture, and the Indian classical music has added to the concept of Indian culture. And we are way ahead than most other countries of the world in terms of our wealth, cultural wealth, not maybe not in financial wealth, but cultural wealth, which demands respect, and people respect us for our culture, right? So please go through the note and ask me any question anytime you want, and save your questions for the interactive session. I'll be meeting you very soon, shortly. Okay? Bye.